Dominick Cruz is right about Daniel Cormier, but he's a bad friend. That's my assessment of the situation. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Dominick Cruz recently came out at a press conference and said, when asked about the commentary in the UFC, he basically criticised Daniel Cormier's commentary very, very harshly. But his words were correct, but of course, he is a friend of Daniel Cormier's, and typically friends don't say that kind of stuff about each other in the public space, which I do understand as to why Daniel Cormier is angry about the situation, but at the same time, let's really go into what Dominick Cruz said, and how Daniel Cormier responded, and break this down and give an overall assessment over who's in the right and who's in the wrong. I'll break it down right now. So it started off, Dominick Cruz was asked about the commentary at the press conference before his fight, and he said about Daniel Cormier's commentary, when it comes to DC, I usually mute it. Very harsh, but of course Dominick Cruz is a trash talker, so he is going to throw these little digs at people. Like, he even does this to Michael Bisping in the commentary booth. He'll throw digs at him, he'll throw digs at other people on commentary. He throws digs at everyone in general about every single aspect of life. I reckon he'd throw a dig at his wife in his wedding vows. That's Dominick Cruz. So, Cruz said during a UFC 269 media day, I love DC, he's my friend, but to me, from my experience, he doesn't do the homework. He just wants to get in and get out, get the job done, make his money, and I think he cares about us, but it's just different. He just doesn't do the preparation from my experience. He might now. I'm hoping he watches some film this time so that he knows what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. But I'm not going to hold my breath on that, that's for sure. Dominick Cruz has always been a guy that just says exactly how he's feeling, regardless of anyone's feelings about the situation. He will say exactly what's on his mind. It's got him in trouble before, like in this situation as well, but it's also helped him in some parts of his career. Of course, he had the whole Hans Molenkamp situation where basically Molenkamp was treating fighters badly so that he could continue sponsoring them. He basically had power over the fighters because he was sponsoring them, so he could kind of treat them however he wanted, because he knew that they kind of needed him, because he was basically paying them a lot of their wage. And Dominick Cruz was the first fighter to speak out about that situation, and people admired Dominick Cruz for that. But in this situation, it's his friend Daniel Cormier. I get how some people will call Dominick Cruz here a bad friend, but here's what I'm gonna say. It's true. It's true. Daniel Cormier is a bit of a shit commentator recently. He doesn't really pay attention. He doesn't really do the research. He's very good whenever there's a wrestling exchange and he can give his expertise on it. And maybe he's funny in certain moments as well, and he has great moments reacting to fights, of course. The famous moment where he's screaming Thug Rose at the top of his lungs whenever Thug Rose beat Joanna Jędrzejczyk in the first fight that they had, I believe at UFC 217. But even still, Cruz is correct. Did you not watch the Jan Blachowicz versus Israel Adesanya fight? DC is incredibly biased at times, doesn't know what he's talking about at times, and in general is not the best commentator. I'll bring up another situation. Josh Emmett versus Michael Johnson. The commentary goes crazy for the big KO they've just witnessed. You know who doesn't go crazy on the commentary? Daniel Cormier. Why? Because he was literally on his phone texting someone in the middle of it. I know Daniel Cormier is a funny guy, but there's a level of professionalism you have to have when you're on this commentary job. He can be funny, but you've also got to back that up with some expertise. Now, I know that a lot of people don't like Dominick Cruz being the person to say this, because Dominick Cruz has had a past of some not so good commentary himself. Let's be real. Dominick Cruz said in the Khabib versus McGregor fight, McGregor's just hoping that Khabib tires himself out by punching him in the face. Very weird statement to make. He obviously clarified that afterwards and said McGregor had no other choice. He couldn't get back up. So his best hope was to just hope that Khabib would gas himself out by punching him in the face. But when he said it on live, it sounded very, very skewed and biased. And it really did come down on top of him because the whole MMA community went after him for it. It's something that they quote every single time Dominick Cruz is even mentioned in anything, or even just mentioning this commentary situation at the moment. Everyone's quoting Dominick Cruz about that situation, and Dominick Cruz in other moments is a bit of a boring fuck on the commentary as well. Like, sometimes they'll have a joke back and forth, and there are some times when you can have a joke back and forth on the commentary, and Dominick Cruz will just shut it down and say, let's get right back to the fights, and then it will be like an awkward situation. And Dominick Cruz also has these things that he does basically where he knows what every fighter should do to win, and if they don't do it, they're doing something wrong. So he'll like see a fighter get into the clinch with someone, and he'll say, well, here's what he has to do. He has to go down for this and get into this position, and then take that position, and then he's going to do this, obviously, because he knows what he's doing, right? Then he's going to do this, take the wrist control, land the big shots. Oh, he doesn't do that for some reason. That's what Dominick Cruz will do sometimes on commentary, and some fans have sort of gone after Dominick Cruz here because, you know, he's not really the best guy to critique someone's commentary of the UFC. But I want to mention this as well. Daniel Cormier, in the very interview where he and Dominick Cruz are arguing back and forth, and this is very fucking important, admitted to basically having a ghostwriter for his commentary. A ghostwriter for his commentary. Why is there no craze about this? Daniel Cormier literally admitted in the very exchange that's going viral right now. A lot of people that are covering this haven't even included the part where Daniel Cormier said that he paid a random guy to research everything and write down all of his lines and notes for him to read them out on commentary. Most media sites have not included this part of it and have basically just included Daniel Cormier getting onto Dominick Cruz about what he said and showing Daniel Cormier as the hero for standing up to Dominick Cruz to his face. Dominick Cruz mentioned it to his face. Even in the interview and the back and forth they had, if you watch the full interview, he even mentions that Dominick Cruz has mentioned this to him before, behind the scenes, many times. So Dominick Cruz has obviously mentioned this before behind the scenes. It's something that DC knows that Dominick Cruz feels about his work. And now he said it in public. Should he have said it in public? As a friend? Probably not. But DC admitted to paying a random MMA fan, I guess, to research everything about the fighters for him, write down his lines and notes, and then DC just reads them out on commentary. I need to explain how fucking tragic that is. DC, this is your job right now. I know you have your wrestling program, but you don't coach there in person a lot. You often leave it to the other coaches, but you have a wrestling program that you fund and you manage and you organize. I understand that. But for a couple of dozen events a year, you are paid to be a commentator for the best fight promotion in the world. And you don't even research or do anything like that. And he said later that, oh, I do that now, but, you know, a couple of months ago, I used to pay a guy to do research for me. Like, I would kill for that fucking job, okay? I would kill for that commentary job. Sitting there, biggest events in the world, around the biggest names, interviewing the fighters afterwards, calling their fights live in one of the best seats you can possibly get to watch a live fight in the commentary booth. I would actually do so much to have a chance at having that job. And I know MMA fans around the world, that would be their dream job. Sitting there in the commentary booth, calling the fights live, having that amazing view, being that close to the action. But Daniel Cormier has got this dream job. 6 figures a year most definitely is what he's getting paid as well. I wouldn't even be surprised if he cracks maybe $1 million a year or something like that. But he must be getting paid a lot of money to do that job. And he can't even research and write the lines a couple of months ago to call these fights. And it makes sense because sometimes he would stumble over some stuff. He wouldn't know who a guy's fought before. I remember watching at UFC, it was the English takeover at Vegas was the theme of the card. Jack Shaw was taking on Hunter Azure in that card or something like that. It maybe wasn't the last one because Jack Shaw fought Ludovic Shalinian or something like that. I know these names, of course, because I'm an MMA fan and I know the fucking names without having to do the research. He fought Ludovic Shalinian in his last fight. Before that, he fought Hunter Azure and he went to a very close decision and he utilized a grappling style. When DC said on the commentary, I'm just so surprised by this heavy grappling style of Jack Shaw. He's grappled every fight his entire career pretty much. He's a grappler. He calls himself the Welsh Habib. And DC didn't know this when watching the fight. He also didn't know anything about Tom Aspinall in his fight with Sergey Spivak, and it was Bisping who was telling him how good Aspinall is, and DC even mentioned on the commentary afterwards, see, I told you how good Aspinall was, I was telling you before this, because he'd been told by Bisping, it was a joke why he was saying it, he'd been told by Bisping that Aspinall was so good, because DC doesn't pay attention to Tom Aspinall before he's fighting in front of him. Like, I get that Dominick Cruz shouldn't have been this bad of a friend, but he's being honest. And before this engagement between Dominick Cruz and DC, everyone thought this about DC. Lazy on commentary, doesn't really do the research, doesn't know much about the sport, but he's funny here and there. There was a ton of criticism about the commentary of DC, just like there has been about Dominick Cruz. But now that it's been like brought to attention and they're actually having a bit of an engagement about it, all of a sudden everyone's on the side of Dominick Cruz, everyone's on the side of Daniel Cormier. But they're on the side of Daniel Cormier over if Dominick Cruz was a good friend or not. So they're saying Dominick Cruz is wrong, but they're saying that he's wrong for being a bad friend. He's actually 100% correct about everything he said. And he mentions this like, I held you accountable. He said, accountability is love, DC. Accountability is love. It's generalization. I'm not allowed to say what I feel. I'm wrong. And that's the thing. A lot of people are commenting on this situation saying that, oh, Dominick Cruz is one of those guys that can never be wrong. He's wrong about being a bad friend, but he's not wrong about anything he said. DC doesn't do the research. He admitted it. He doesn't do the notes. He doesn't look up the fighter's history. At least not until a couple of weeks ago or months ago or however long he stopped paying this random guy to do all of his research for him. That's your job. That's what you're paid so much money to do. Show interest in the sport and actually do the research. Honestly, you shouldn't have to do a research. I could do a full card prediction for next weekend's card and not do a single bit of research. I'd know every single history of every single fighter. You know why? Because I've watched the sport, early prelims till the main event, every single card, every single weekend without fail. But Daniel Cormier, the guy paid to be an expert on the sport, has a researcher give him his notes on what to say. He doesn't write any of them. Like, he's in the wrong here. And he outed himself for being in the wrong. And Dominic said, of course, no, not Dominic. DC said, of course, you know, this stuff should be said in private, not in public. But then also mentioned that Dominick Cruz has mentioned it to him in private. And now he's saying it in public. And typically, you know, Dominick Cruz, he's cutting weight. He's being asked a question at a press conference. He likes to stir up a little bit of drama. So he said a couple of words. I do believe the main passive aggressiveness from DC stems from him worrying that this is going to cost him his job. Like, genuinely, what Dominick Cruz said, which was true, could cost DC his job. Realistically. I reckon, you know what's going to happen here? The backlash is so in favour of DC, Dominick Cruz won't be commentating again. And you know what definitely won't happen? They won't be on commentary together again. So that'll limit Dominick Cruz from being at a certain number of events per year. But people love DC. They love his personality. But the guy literally admitted in the interview to paying a random person to do all of his research for him, to write all of his notes down, and he just reads them out on camera and gets the best seat in the house and gets paid shit tons of money. Someone's got to call him out. It shouldn't have been Dominick Cruz. It should have been some random... It should have been me. I've done it before. I've made videos on the shit commentary at UFC 259. I've made those videos. UFC 259, of course, was Jan Blachowicz versus Israel Adesanya, I believe, if my memory's correct. But, like, I should be the guy to call him out. I understand that. But Cruz is a friend, so it's like a bad friendship move. But at the same time, you got to hold your friends accountable, man. If I saw my friend doing something wrong, I'd mention it to him. You know? I have no loyalty bias in that way. Maybe that's just me. And Dominick Cruz is kind of the same way. But if I see my friend doing something wrong, like if all my friends are like in the wrong in a situation, I'm not going to just side with them because they're my friends. You got to be like brutally honest. And I guess in today's society, it's not allowed to criticize someone without being a hater. That's kind of like the California, London, Brighton, San Francisco kind of era that we're in right now, where you can't be critical without hatred, which is very strange. But Dominick Cruz literally said, listen, you're my boy, DC, but this is all true. You've admitted it yourself. You don't do the research for these fights. Now, it's kind of shady that he did it in the public because, of course, DC can get fired if, like, it's taken the wrong way and people didn't side with DC here and all sided with Dominick Cruz. But if Dominick Cruz never said the thing about Khabib gassing out, punching Conor McGregor, then I think people would side with Dominick Cruz here. But he's a bad friend, but everything he said is true. And that's my opinion on the situation. DC needs to amp up his fucking game. If you're paid, and your sole job in life right now is to be an expert in MMA, I better not fucking find out that you're paying someone to do research on MMA for you, and you're just reading out the fucking lines and talking points. That's fucking blasphemy. That's like calling someone the best rapper in the world and then finding out they have a ghostwriter, but the person who exposed them for having a ghostwriter is in the wrong because you shouldn't do that to a friend of yours, you know? Doesn't make any sense. The guy's still a fraud for acting like he's one of the best rappers in the world despite having a ghostwriter. Doesn't make no sense to me. But either way, the backlash is against Dominick Cruz. I get it, Daniel Cormier's a lovable guy, and he handled the situation very confrontationally, so... And Dominick Cruz is also a little fucking worm of a cunt, so I will mention that at the end of this video. Cruz is such an annoying prick when he sits there and goes... it's just like... he has these little, like, jabs in between when someone's saying stuff, like, Bisping came into the situation and he said, listen, there's no one right or wrong here, and Cruz, like, little jived in with a little... yeah, see, I'm not wrong. You know what I mean? Like, he's just such an annoying little worm of a cunt in these, like, combative situations. But, you know, I think he's in the right. You know, DC needs to fix up his fucking game. And admitting that you had a ghostwriter? I can't stress that point enough here. You're paid to be an expert in MMA. You're listened to by millions of fans as an expert on MMA. People bring you on their show non-stop to ask you questions about MMA and the fights coming up because they perceive you as the expert of MMA. Up until a couple of months ago, your entire career of being this expert in MMA has been someone else's words and someone else's notes and someone else's lines. Fuck off. You know what I mean? That's a bad fucking move. But DC... of course, is correct. Dominick Cruz is a bad friend, but he's an honest friend. I kind of know which one I'd prefer. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Let me know how you feel about this situation as well. I think they're both in the wrong, but I'd rather some honesty. I think we're missing a bit of honesty in this current generation and era of life. And I think it's honesty that will drive civilization forward. My opinion. Click that button up there. Toodle pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye.